Hey, what's good, y'all? It's Stinger, and today I'm going to be showing you, who most definitely touches grass, how to make some groovy and beautiful jazz samples, such as this one. Alright, so here is the first melodic aspect that I started with, so I'm just going to play it and break it down piece by piece. Alright, so the first thing I laid down for this melody is the bass line, and this specific bass line is going from the 2 to the 5, back to the 2, and to the 1. All I did to get this was I looked up common jazz chord progressions and kind of altered it a little bit. So if you're working with any kind of new genre that you've never really experimented with, I recommend looking up some common chord progressions and making them your own in some way. Also, what I did for this bass line is I integrated some rhythmic short notes, which will come handy later on. And I also made the bass line kind of sporadic in terms of rhythm. Like this A is hitting somewhere where in conjunction with the other notes, it doesn't really sound natural, but that's kind of what you want to go for when it comes to jazz. You want to go for something kind of obscure and unique. So with that being said, this is what the bass line sounds like. Alright, and after I had that bass line laid out, I threw some chords an octave higher. As you can see here, none of these are just basic triads. Like this one is a 7th, this one's an octave, this one's a 9th, and this one's a 7th as well. Making use of bigger chords like these is a great way to make your melodies more unique and lush. So some common chords that are my go-to are 7th chords, 9th chords, and octaves. And as you can see for this last chord right here, we have a note that's going off scale. I decided to throw this in just to stay true to the jazzy nature of this melody, because going off key is something that is very common when it comes to that genre. So all I did to make it go off key and sound good was I took the 7th of the chord and just put it down 1 semitone. Also over here I have the chord transposed a little bit to give it some variation. So the original chord had the B down here and I just brought it up an octave. So this is what the first rendition of the chord progression sounds like. Alright, and after I had that all laid out, I made some final adjustments just to make the melody sound a little bit better. All I did was I transposed some notes from the chords down an octave just to make the chords sound a little bit more full and lush. And the notes that I used for all of these were the 3rd of the chords. Also, I integrated some strumming to give the melody a little bit more of a human aspect. And I also didn't just hit Control A, Alt S to just strum everything at once. I went in and selected each chord and strummed them all individually to really nail in that sound like a human is actually playing it. Also for this last chord, I made the strum super dramatic just to emphasize the sort of diminished nature of the chord. So altogether, this is what the final melody sounds like. Alright, so now that we've got the first melody done, let's move into the next. After I had that first melody laid out, I grabbed the soft piano from Labs, which is a free VST with a bunch of really cool sounds. And all I did for that was I copied over the first melody into this. And I did this just to make the melody sound even more full by integrating some new layered components. After that, I have another sound yet again from Labs, being the Guitar Harmonics Glass Cabinet, and it's playing this melody. And all that's doing is playing the top notes of the original melody just to emphasize the harmonics a little bit more. So now that that's over with, we can get into the fun part, these vocals. So before I break them down, I just want to play out the vocals just so you guys can hear what they sound like all on their own. So if you couldn't tell already, all these vocals are live, and I can't sing by any means or measure, but I was able to accomplish this by taking the notes of the chords and trying to replicate them as best as I could to kind of give it a choir-like vibe. So for this first portion, I just took the E minor chord that was playing at the time and broke down the vocals and sung the E, the G, and the B, so that all together they would sound like this. Now keep in mind, since I don't have any singing capacity, this did take quite a long time, but the best tip I can give you is to load up an auto-tune and play the note that you're trying to play on the keyboard and try to match it as best as you can with the auto-tune. So if I want to sing the E, I just play it in my piano and try to replicate that as best as I can. Obviously it's a little bit off tune, but you get the gist. And I just did that for every single one of the chords. It took a little bit of time, but the final outcome came out really, really nice. I also recommend not just doing one note at a time, but to add in some transition notes if you feel like you can. Like for this one, when it goes from the C sharp to the C out of key, I didn't want it to just be one vox playing the C sharp and one vox playing the C, so I added in a transition in the vocals. And that little part right there kind of just seals the deal when it comes to the vocals. The mixing on the vocals is pretty intense. There's a whole lot going on just because my mic isn't really the best, so I had to do a lot of processing. So the first thing I have down is a reverb with the dry down and the wet a bit up because I didn't want it to be too prevalent in the mix. I also threw down a bunch of EQs, just taking out some unwanted frequencies that weren't really resonating well. I also threw in Valhalla Supermassive. It says it's fresh air, but it's not, and it's just on the default preset. I also threw in a couple compressors just because I liked how they sound. I'm gonna be honest, I've been producing for 5 years and I still don't know what compressors do. And then I also threw down this altar boy on the rich 5th preset, which brings the mix down a bunch and adds a 5th layer below your vocals. And last but not least, we have the holy plugin OTT. If you feel like your vocals, melody, master, spaghetti tortellini is missing anything, throw some OTT on it and it will make anything better. So without any of the effects, this is what the vocals sound like. Yeah, it doesn't sound very good. And the last component, which isn't a melodic aspect at all, but I decided to keep it in because it added a little bit of groove to the melody, is this drum pattern from SSD Sampler. As you can tell, that's a super jazzy drum loop, and I could not make that myself, so all I did was took the grooves from SSD Sampler and dragged one in. SSD Sampler is probably my favorite acoustic drum plugin. I've tried a lot, and this is by far the best sounding one, and it has a bunch of different grooves in a lot of genres like jazz, metal, rock, country, that you could just drag and drop into your MIDI, and then boom, you're done. So with that being said, this is what the final melody sounds like all together. So that's gonna pretty much cover how to make a groovy jazz melody. Hopefully you learned something new and enjoyed the tutorial. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the comments down below and I will do my very, very best to answer them. Other than that, that's gonna be it. Peace.